All right, this will be your installation for rock sliders, step sliders, ultimate rock sliders for your 200 series Land Cruiser. When you get your sliders, they're gonna be all wrapped up, beautiful little box. Once you rip open that cardboard, you're gonna see we're gonna do everything we can to lay out the hardware for you. If not, everything's got a numbering on the bolt head. D for driver side, that's US driver side or the muffler side. P, passenger side, fuel tank side, and then 1 through 6 on the driver side, 1 through 5 on the passenger side. So when we're over here talking, hey, there's D3, it's numbered on it, it's gonna come all together. It's not gonna come with anti-seize on it, so we highly recommend putting a little bit of anti-seize. You don't have to glob it, it's just enough to prevent galling. And here we go. So the first thing is to take off the stock running board. Stock running board is bolted into here. There's a little hook. We've already removed this. We like putting these bolts back in because it just keeps the corrosion down by not having less things fly in there. At that point, you need to come in and remove all the plastic plugs for the alignment holes along the frame. Make sure that pretty much this area here is clear. And also, we'll be using there, and we'll take off these heat shields. So here we go. For tools, Toyota pretty much is gonna have 12mm bolt heads for almost everything, or a 10. For a lot of our hardware that's gonna go back in, it'll be a 13mm. And for the large 5/8 bolts that goes on there, that's gonna be a 24mm. So this heat shield right here, these get rusted pretty bad. If you ever see this tab that the bolt is fastened to right now, when you're trying to take it out, it starts bending on you. Don't just keep wrenching on it, you're just gonna bend the tab over. I like to take a pair of pliers from up here and grab onto it to support that tab to take this out safely. If not, you know, you're just gonna damage it. No reason for that. So while I'm doing this, I see a lot of people talking about needing a lift. We've got 2 lifts here in the shop. We don't use them for sliders. It's ridiculous. Because when you see how we get this up here, it's just so much easier to do it with 2 nice ramps that you drive onto and some jack stands for the rear. That's only if you have a non-lifted vehicle. You can see where if you had a lift, this would be kind of a lot easier. I know on my 200, I don't put it up on anything to work on it. It's high enough. So a little tip. Now we have the KDSS heat shield. All right, so to take off the KDSS lines, we have to loosen them because we're gonna put that gigantic 3/8 full height, full length frame plate between the KDSS lines and the frame itself. So that means these lines need to be loosened and give some play. It's very gentle on the lines because we're not sitting here trying to pry them. We just let them have their movement. So I like to start. See if I can get a light in here. You have a 10 millimeter that starts right here. And I go all the way to the back and stop just to the rear of the junction inside the frame rail. So just follow me along and let's see exactly how we do this. Hi, Chip. Oh, wow, that customer's isn't even tight there. Hey, this is also a good time to find out what happens to your 200 over the years. All right, so after you got that 10 mil done up here in the fender well, it's time for this one. This is this one. This is what everybody complains about. Doesn't matter what slider it is, but these little flex head 12 millimeters, oh, they're just the best. You can just get in there, start loosening, knock a bunch of dirt into your mouth, and go nuts. All sorts of different angles. I like putting my finger on there, loosens them up, just whatever it works with. Depending on how the body got sat on the frame at the factory will dictate which kind of angle you like to do. So much dirt in my eyes. It's got these ballistic contacts. Hell yeah. There you go. Start laying them out in a little line to where no one's gonna knock into them. 12 millimeter on the junctions. I like to break them loose with a 3/8 drive. I come in here with a nice little 1/4 inch drive, flex head. Just get to work. Oh, so much dirt. Mudding. 5 minutes of fun, 15 years of dirt in your eyes. That's why they made that website. I hate mud. It's totally true. Hate it. Now, if you have a newer or a later model year 200, you're probably going to be looking at this going, "Ooh, I only have one. It's okay." But I just decided that they didn't want to put that much money into it and have 2 junction blocks. It's not like it was needed. Makes sense to get rid of one. So you won't have to deal with this one. For the first of the 200s, you'll have 2 junction blocks. While you're here, while not a KDSS line, start popping these out of the way. You don't have to do this one. You don't have to. But I like to. Ooh. You'll only need one of these Ebrake cable bolts to go back in. That'll be that last one. We will have replacements for the ones that go into the frame, since they need to be longer to fit over the frame plate. Alright. Need to get an extension. Got a fastener just on the top side of the KDSS valves. 3-inch extension. A 3/8 drive works really well. And since we're only doing slider work, not doing anything with the suspension, you don't need to loosen your KDSS set screws. This has nothing to do with that. Sorry for the camera not looking at anything right now. Kind of need to move my arms in a way to get that top bolt out. Pretty much what I'm doing is I'm unscrewing with my right hand on the extension, and I'm using my left hand on the bolt head to keep it from to keep it taut and not let it fall. That'll bring that one out. Don't need the extension for the bottom. Leave it on there if you want. There's always got to be one. It just fights its way all the way out. We got a couple questions about guys if they should hit this with penetrating lube. Yeah, why not? Nothing wrong with that. Just make sure you're actually trying to get it into where it's going to get behind the threads. Just spraying the bolt head, it's not going to help as good as actually getting it to where it's going to douse down. All right, so now you got everything loose. See how it can just pry out? There's super little stress that's going to be on the lines because the cylinders that are here and the one that's up front, they're on pivots top and bottom because they have to, since they're attached to suspension components that are going to be articulating. So that's where you can have that flex, not putting an ounce of stress on anything. All right, Chip. This is where you grab a friend. If you don't have a friend, I hope you're at the gym working out. But it's really not that bad. With these lifts and everything, this is still the best. Get a floor jack, get, like a 1x4 piece of ply, wrap it in some foam, put it like this. It's all the tools we could ever have. It's the best thing. I'm gonna take my gloves off because they got a bunch of grit in them, and these are really beautiful semi-gloss blacked ones. Lay it down and balance it out. Put the little block of wood right to the edge. Because when you're pumping this up, you don't want to be trying to push it up against the frame rail. And it just balances there. Now this is where a little bit of finesse is needed. And this is where having it on a floor jack is just so much better than having your truck up on a lift, because then you try and fit a transmission jack between the arms. It's just not gonna be fun. All right, you wanna slide that thing in? So we're just gonna bring it up. It's gonna be pretty easy to know where they go. The big hole lines up with the big hole. There we go, the light a little better. So like this big hole, it's gonna line up to that big hole. Make it pretty easy.
I think I need to go to the front.
Yeah. All right. This is where having a second set of hands is good, because like Chip is, bringing it up, and someone here can be lining them up, lining the slider up. All right, so here's where you just take a second, take a little pause for the cause, because all the person down here is going to do is keep this junction block away. If you have one of the newer ones that only has one, you need to pay attention to this tab that's further to the rear, because it's easy for it to get caught between the frame and the frame plate of our sliders. If you have one with two junction blocks, pretty much when you pull this out, it's going to bring this tab out. It'll never get stuck. So it's something to remember if you have one of the newer 200s. All right, Chip, can you pump that up a little bit? Get under here. I know, my huge lights aren't gonna do anything. Boom. All right, let me get an inch. And stop. You got these little tabs on the inside of these junction blocks. That's what you're needing to clear. So see how I can pull it away? Right there, this little tab, you can pull it away. keeping my mind on this thing. Don't let it get caught behind there. All right, Chip, pump that up. A little bit more, stop, and it just falls in. So now it's in there. Let's bring that back up against the frame rail a little bit and stop. And right here, yeah. So we got these holes, and they're gonna kind of help you line it up, so you can just shift it a little bit, because it's all balancing on here. That's why the floor jack is so nice. Look at this. Like you can adjust it, you can pitch it forward, backward, you can slide it, all while nobody's sitting here trying to hold up the slider. You can do your finessing with it. All right. So the first one that I like to start off with is D3, because it's in the middle. That's it. That's why. You don't have to, but I'd like to. Now, here's another one that we see a lot is that we make all these bolts. We cut them shorter for a reason. I've seen out on forums and stuff, guys are like, oh, I had to go get longer bolts because whatever BudBuilt bought, they didn't give me long enough. No, BudBuilt bought pretty long fasteners, and we chop everything down to be just right. And we do that because we're avoiding things like the gas tank or brake lines or fuel lines. So there's a reason that they're all the certain length. If you find yourself to where you got a backing plate, you got a bolt, and you're like, oh man, I just need like a thread. Just come in here, take the spring washer out, and then fasten it. Once you get more on the slider and it starts bringing it tighter, because clamping force is going to compress every little inch in there, then you can come back on the one that you didn't put the spring washer in, take that back out, and or put the spring washer back in, and boom, you're back in business. You buy some pretty over-the-top spring washers. They're not made and then bent, they're actually cut in a curve, so that's where they hold pretty dang tight. Oh, Chip, could you give me a pair of pliers? Here's the one thing that we have to do to your Land Cruiser. If you want to zip that off with a like a Dremel, you can do that. Or you can just break it off. Here you go. You can leave it, but it's unnecessary. It doesn't do anything. There's nothing there ever. Like putting the frame plate like this. It just sits in there. And then from the other side, there's a huge bolt hole. See? See how the spring washer, because look, I got a big air gap here. Like you can't squeeze this thing tighter to the frame to get that to bite into it. But I don't want to have a bolt coming out here, so that's why we make these shorter. So just take your spring washer off. It almost always happens for the first one you put on. And now that one is threading in. And what I'll do is when I get some clamping force on like D2 or D4, I'll come back and just drop the spring washer in that one. All right. What you got there for me? D2. D2 is gonna come in right here. Here's another one that I like to, another little technique. Oops. technique is to not drop the washer. So if you have, I'll come out for this. You're trying to fit a lollipop through the frame, which isn't a part of your body. So you don't really know what's happening out there, and you're trying to fit a bolt to it, and you don't have feeling in the bolt. So all I do is I put the lollipop into the frame, and I use my finger to find where it is and guide it to the hole. And once I go, oh, there it is. That's where I need it. Then I just leave the lollipop where it's at, take my hand out, and then boom. You'll be able to find it so much easier versus you got a lollipop in this and you're just fighting to try and figure out how to get the two to come together. Just lay that on my chest. Holding it, finding it with my finger. See, the glove doesn't even help. There you go. So I found it with my index finger. Keep the lollipop still. And threading it in. That's what makes those pretty easy to do. Alright, so D2 is in. D4. And without sliding over the other side this is the hole you're going into for D4. So on this side, I bring my hand up to the opposite side and I go forward. Boom, I find a big gigantic hole. That's where D4 is going. Same thing. Just take it, angle it like that. Spin it. Find it with my finger. And D4 is in. Now for D5, a little easier because it's not a lollipop, it's going to be a backing plate. There's a hole that's right on the other side of this. Yep, see, not getting a bite. That's okay. Just take the spring washer out. I'll come back and put that in once I get the other ones tightened up. Another one that you don't want to put a longer bolt on because, you know, there's this KDSS valve. Punching into that would really set you up for a bad, you have a bad life, really, when that thing explodes in front of your face. Notice how I got the lollipop stem going out this way. And I got it's offset, moves the backing plate over, and I just put it kind of right there. Fits in this little notch. Then we have D6. This has a small washer on it. There's another thing, the slider, because it's not bolted all the way on, it's being pivoted on the jack. It was a little low. I can just freely move it up and down, get it where I need it, versus trying to have a bunch of friends hold on to it. And I like to angle it up a little bit. Heat shield's gonna come back up and bolt into this, but this is all open. All right. At this point, you can snug it up a little bit, kind of draw it in. Notice how I didn't put D1 in. We'll come back.
In first.
Yeah, definitely. All right, I'm just gonna snug up this one a little bit. All right, so at this point, like Chip just said, this can move and shift and go all over the place. So don't go start cranking down on all the 5/8 bolts. You're going to use in the kit, it'll come with some M8s. They're gonna be the two longest ones. Two little washers that go on top of it, and that's going to replace the junction blocks. This is a lot of little things to fit in, and that's where you want to keep all these 5/8 bolts loose, because you can then guide the slider around and get every fastener installed. Yep. Starting to catch.
I got it right here. 13.
Man, look at you, Chip. See, this is what happens when you have someone that helps you. Everything just goes better. I'm not a big fan of you just putting the bolt in and then just starting to go nuts on it, because you might cross thread. So make sure that you feel that initial bite. Sometimes I like to kind of get everything lined up, go counterclockwise, boop, feel it lock in, and then you can start threading her in. Any little resistance, it's cross-threaded. Back it off and try it again. That's how smooth it should be, like this. We want to get at least a few things of engagement, but leave it loose because we've got a lot of other things to put in. Nope. Right now I'm going counterclockwise, feeling for where the beginning of the threads bite. Just kind of moving the junction blocks, the slider frame plate, making it to where I can just hand thread it in. And there it is, catches. You got the new one for the bracket. Little gold one. That's going to go on that bracket just to the rear of the junction blocks. With those spring washers that got to go back in. Look at this one. All nice and off. So instead of trying to push up on it here, I'm going to grab the cylinders back here. You get a heck of a lot more adjustability. And that one's in. Now, if you have an 08 to 11, you get to use all of these bolt holes. If you have a 13 or newer, Toyota stopped welding all the captive nuts in, so you don't get to utilize those. In all honesty, it's not going to make a difference with these 5/8 bolts that we do, but you know, why would you not want more stuff attached? So if you have it, screw it on in. But know that you just don't need it. So I'll just get that one kind of in there for this 2015 model. All right, so at this point, you have all bolts, 5/8 bolts in, other than D1, that one stays out. And you have all of your KDSS junction blocks down here that are in, plus that little bracket, and whatever ones you can fit in. You don't have to worry about the Ebrake cables just yet. And you can just come in here and tighten these just a hair, but you want to be able to like move this and shift this around. And if you tighten one of these up, it's just going to lock down on the frame and it's not going anywhere. It's kind of interesting to see. People don't believe it, but it doesn't need a lot. So they're all just hand tight, and I can just let go of the jack and it's not going to go anywhere. But you want this ability to shift forward and backward, and we will come back to why you need that. So at this point, you need to drop the gas tank factory skid out, because you're going to need access to the frame that the gas tank skid covers. So, Chip, can you take that thing out? How ridiculous is my Creeper 2? Like, don't knock it. That's purely for you guys. I don't have that thing on there. I have a big headlamp on my head, but now I got a big GoPro on my head. So you got 5, 2 on the frame rail, 1 back further on the frame rail, 1 right here, and 1 up through there by the prop shaft. Pretty much when it comes out, try and bring it straight down. You'll have to push a little bit on these tabs to get it around things. It's just how Toyota designed it. This heat shield right here, you are going to want to take this out, and I will get started on that. America. And you're going to take this bolt out because you're gonna need to give yourself some clearance to fit a lollipop in there. Love these flex heads. And that's all you're looking for, just a little bit of clearance there. As you see, Chip pulls it down to where, when it's coming out, this tab here is going to get caught on a rear lower control arm. And so instead of trying to fight it out like that, you're going to tilt it down towards the inside, and then it slides that way. Just go ahead and set this off to the side. It'll go right back in once the sliders are in place. And if you have our gas tank skid, same thing. It needs to come out to give some clearance. Now, there's also going to be those plastic alignment hole caps that need to come out. There's one in there. So we'll start popping those out. And the Ebrake cable lines need to come out also. I don't like it when anything falls into a frame rail. The muscles. Totally worth it. All right. Chip, would you mind sliding that thing up against the frame rail? Passenger side is significantly easier. That's why we like to do it last, because that way you don't come in here and put passenger side on first, get a false sense of accomplishment. Then you have to go over to driver's side and be like, oh man, I'm gonna be done in 20 minutes. Nope. KDSS. I love KDSS, it's awesome, but it is mounted to the outside of the frame rail. Bring it up against the frame a little tighter. And half pump right there. All right. Might slide it a little forward. Maybe kind of tip how I like it. Now we're gonna go for P3 again. Some people have a few issues with this, but it kind of comes back to the whole, just find the lollipop with your actual finger. And you'll have a way easier time. So it's going in through here, and it's going rearward. This edge here is going to fall right into the hole of the frame rail. The BudBuilt frame plate is a lot bigger. So what I'm doing is, you won't be able to see it with the gusset. So I've got my finger in the threads, I've guided it in and it locked in. See, notice how I'm like pushing on it and I'm locked in there. So I found the lollipop with my index finger and guided it into the frame rail hole. And that's it. All right. Now, P2. All right, so for P2, we've got the needle nose channel locks on the end. It's gonna go in straight through the internal gusset in here. And then you start to turn it towards the rear. It's gonna get a little hung up right there. That's okay. You just gently push on it and then get it in behind the brake line bracket. It's coming out of the hole that's going to be just rearward of the factory transmission crossmember. And then again, you know, use your finger to find the threads, and then use the needle nose channel locks to adjust the pitch out on the end of the lollipop. And that's it. P1 goes through the same hole, feed it in from the outside. And then the bracket is going to go facing upwards. That's it. Everything can be tightened up from the outside. Just make sure that this stays upright, and it's purely because the heat shield is going to cover. If it goes the other way down, it'll cover that hole. Now for P4 and 5. All right, so you're going to get 2 bolts for P5. There's the one that's going to be already in it, and then there's a shorter one. This is because even sometimes taking out the spring washer, we just couldn't get enough bite to start clamping everything down. So the longer one is to get everything started and threaded in, and once while you're in there looking, is that your gas tank is here, and this bolt is going to start getting closer and closer to it. Real world here. So once you feel like, okay, I'm getting too close, that's where you have the final P5. It's shorter. Put that one in. That way you have clearance for your fuel tank.
Saw that one coming.
Didn't you? Yeah. I normally don't have, you know, a camera on my head. All right, so this is where it even gets me sometimes. You're looking, you have the front strap on the gas tank. And you follow it back. There's a rectangular hole. Then still going to the rear, you have a circular hole, and then going more to the rear, you have another rectangular hole. You're going for these two that are more forward. Don't look at that rear rectangular hole, nothing goes in that. If you try and get a backing plate in there, it takes a lot of force, and you can get it in there, but there's just nothing on the other side for you. So these two, this is P4, this is P5. It doesn't really matter which one you do first. You just get them in there. And then some people ask about the offset. I like offsetting it to clear this frame outside. It'll have a little bit of resistance. The reason is because this lip will be pushing on the frame as it goes up in there, but it's not going to be a lot. You just push on it with your thumbs. Depending on how old your 200 is, or how much fuel is in the resin tank, will bubble it in or out. And that one's threaded in. So then I'll grab P4. I go the same way with it. It's offset to the rear. It just goes in there. This is probably sometimes the one that I might not put in, or take the spring washer out to get it to bite, just because it's so close to P5. But for the emphasis of how to make it super easy, I'll take it out and just put it in. Take the spring washer out, put the whole bolt in. Oop. There you go. And you've got a lot of play on this one. You're just going for it to be completely up and down. And lining up. There we go. Sorry, I had the offset wrong. Offset to the front. It's where the entire backing plate is up and down on the frame rail. Nothing wrong with going a little catty corner. Gives more load distribution. All right. Okay, so we got all the bolts in on both sides, but there still is, play able to happen. I like to just snug up the threes. So P3 just a little bit more, give it enough threads. But don't let it actually start compressing that spring washer, because you'll never be able to move this thing. And with really nothing holding it up, because it's that big old one-piece frame plate, it's just gonna hold itself in there with friction. It's pretty neat, actually. Okay, so this is where some finesse comes in. The 200 frame and the body get plopped down from the factory. It's not perfect. It's not exactly in the center every time. We see Kmart puts this in their instructions, which is great. We know about it. So depending on how the body gets configured, whether little clockwise, little counterclockwise, forward, backward, is going to be what you want to line up your sliders off of. So, because we're bolting something to the frame now, but it's going to line up on the body, two separate components. So I like to come in here and make this spear edge right in line. This almost never happens, but but that's about where I want it. Maybe a little bit to the rear. And I can just pick up and kind of shift it forward or backward to where I like how it looks to just follow the curve of the wheel arch down into the slider. So this is all just personal preference, how you like to do it, where you think it feels the best. Like, see how if I pulled it way out, it just doesn't look right. It looks like it's sticking out. You got about an inch of adjustability forward and backward. But notice how I'm gonna keep letting the slider hang there. Don't force the slider all the way up with the jack and then try and tighten it down. Let it hang, let it droop, give it its space that it was designed to have. We want that 20 to 25 millimeters offset from anything. Should a catastrophic impact happen, which is pretty much jumping the truck 4 or 5 feet in the air, we still want to protect the body. Once you have your angles to where you like how it looks, not sticking out too much, not sticking in too far, just go across, start all the 5/8 bolts and begin getting them tightened up. Once you have everything tightened up, we will come back at D1. It is time to put in D1. And D1's the only one that feeds in from the inside to the outside. This goes right through there. And right in here. And feed its way out. You don't want to shove this up here too high because it's going to create a clearance issue inside here, which you'll get it, but getting this bolt back in. So when you are tightening these things down, I like keeping this one here on an angle, kind of from bottom left up to top right, because you get a heat shield that's going to bolt in here, 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 and back here, but it's open. And what we're trying to do is distribute that load as high up and down as possible. Now in this one, with just getting the other bolts in, I noticed that I had enough space, and I simply just pulled this bolt out and already got the lock washer back on it, because all these others were already starting to kind of pull this tight for me. We get a lot of questions about how tight we should make these. We ran the calculation on it. It's way up there because it's a 5/8 bolt. I like to just use a 1/2-inch drive and push on it. You're not as strong when you push versus pull, and just get it tight. The strength of the slider to the frame doesn't actually come from how tight this is here. It needs to be clamped, yes, but you going from 40 foot-pounds to 200 foot-pounds isn't going to change how the slider works with the frame rail. Its strength comes from the fact that it runs the entire length of the frame rail and puts all that pressure at the top. So that way when the impact happens and it's pushing up, we have pretty gentle pressure running up and down the entire frame rail, versus if we had like just 2 plates, where one in the back and one in the front. Think of how much surface area you're losing, how much more you're pushing into the frame metal. That, with these brackets, there's just a ton of surface area to distribute that load versus trying to bite into like a tiny M8 or something like that. Now in this one here, on D5, we want to give ourselves that little bit of clearance here for this captive nut, because the heat shield's going to go over it. If you shove this as far towards the front of the vehicle, you might create a little clearance issue. So just keep in mind to let that one come as far to the rear as possible. Those are all snugged in there. We hooked up onto D1. And D1's going to want to go up at you. So you're just going to be grabbing onto here and keeping it from rotating upward. There we go. And I like it when it comes most to the rear as much as possible, because I want to avoid this little junction block here. And we're keeping this angle here a little lower, so that way we're not running into the lines. And again, that's the sand that's stuck in this fluid film compressing. There we go. Now remember, we have all this needs to be tightened down, but that's where we put these bolts in, the KDSS, before we start cranking on this, because what'll happen is if you try to crank down all your 5/8 bolts, you might not have everything lined up just right, and these will become very hard to get in. But to put back in the originals is we have this M12 that needs to go back into this junction block here. And the reason why we don't want to switch out the original is because using this, I'm sorry, I said M10, this M8 bolt, it has a 12mm head, which is smaller than what we would be able to provide, and that gives you more clearance when you're trying to crank it down in there. But you'll still be able to get the bite on it with just your fingers, like I just did, and then use these wonderful little 12mm flex heads. And be sure to put some pressure on the bolt head so it rotates the way you want it to go, and then just slowly tighten it up. Not much of a big deal, honestly. It just kind of goes in there. All right. So be sure to Jack's too close to me. Be sure to put back in the bolt up towards the front and work your way all the way to the rear. And for the final thing, once you have it all, well, second to final thing is the Ebrake cables. There's a little tab here that we don't need to use for retention. So instead of it digging into the powder coating, just go ahead and rotate it out of the way. That's going to be for these two. Grab your short golds. Is that a rock? I like to take this little bracket here, grab the back side of it, and just pull it. Give it a little bit more of a bend. That's a me kind of thing. Not necessarily needed. I just think it looks better. One thing to keep in mind is that if you do have the vehicle up and your Ebrake cable has been pulled tight, it's going to be harder to manipulate this, which is what we did. If you find yourself in that position and you don't want to release your Ebrake cable, it's not so much of a big deal. You can still get everything where you need it to be, even with tension in there. You just go ahead and loosen this one up back here. It'll help you get those new ones in. And then you can go back and put these in. I'll tighten this up while I'm here. It's okay to back things off when you just don't feel right about them. Guess it feels the same. Better safe than sorry. All right. So I'll go in here, snug all these up. Remember, if you replace them, they are now a 13 millimeter. And you will work your way down the line and just snug them all up. Don't forget about the GDSS cylinder down here. And then put your heat shields back in. And then to finish it up, just put your gas tank. And that would conclude how to install BudBuilt rock sliders.